welcome back to Rush Roundtable. This is episode 252. We're going to be talking about Armor and Sword, second track off Snakes and Arrows. We have a fantastic panel this week. We have Michael, Alana, Ryder, Kira, and myself. And before we get into the meat and bones of the song, we're going to ask you to please like, subscribe to the channel so you're always notified of new episodes. Leave a comment. That actually affects the algorithm. Want to get us out there, want to see more of us. Help us along. Share this episode and a link to it to your favorite Rush social media pages. And don't forget to check out our sponsors. Links are below, so you can see those down there. And if you want, throw us a tip on Ko-fi, if you feel like it. We also have a link to our merch shop, which we'd like you to check out, also below. So, lest I forget to mention that, you too can drink at the best of them. So that being said, let's get into Armor and Sword. So we've got that killer intro. Neil starts off with the drums, that sort of military / martial sound that he's got to him. And then the bass comes in, get a driving bass line going, dual guitar lines, and then that metallic use of harmonics that Alex uses is one of my favorite parts of the song. So the intro comes in fairly strong. So who's got something to talk about the intro?
So I do. So Martin Popoff in the book Driven says that there's actually a sample of waxed sheet metal in that intro, which is part of why it's so groovy and so heavy. He says that it's an odd one, arguably with ill-fitting parts, but it's highly creative. What's more, it also adds the idea that Rush is deliberately building an arcane new sound, one that will last across this record and Clockwork Angels. Neil attributes the opening polyrhythmic signature on this song to something Buddy Rich does on Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. And for those who are Rush fans, you can go back to Burning for Buddy, and Dave Weckl, who has played with Chick Corea and Alan Holdsworth, covers that track on the Burning for Buddy tribute from back in 1994.
Excellent.
Yeah, this intro is super, super cool. I'll get right out of the gate and just say it. This is my favorite song on Snakes and Arrows. Like, oh my gosh. We'll get into it. I won't rant and rave for too long, but I think this is just one of the tightest like performances from Rush. The lyric set is incredible. And right out of the gate with this intro, I love how Neil settles into the groove, how it kind of builds up throughout the intro. Um, but once it kind of hits this like wide open section, Getty hits these massive bass chords that just it fills up the space just so well. You have a lot of different guitar work going on with Alex. This intro is gorgeous, and how it comes back in the song, and how they. I love that you mentioned that it was ill-fitting sections. My dad. This is also one of, if not his favorite songs from Snakes and Arrows, and he always told me when the album first came out, he was like, "Yeah, a bunch of people never. They're like, I don't like how this like changes. I don't like how things come together, but I think." It's actually really, really cool. So I think the way they come back to some of these themes and hop back between sections, I think it's actually they do a lot of really cool things here. So I'm really interested to see like as we break it down, like as we highlight some of these like themes as they return, if we can kind of put to rest some of the notion that some of these like parts are kind of disparate, disconnected, like ill-fitting. I'm kind of curious to see how it goes through with this discussion.
And like nothing sets the tone. Far Cry is such a strong Rush, no pun intended, right out of the gate. But Armor and Sword truly sets in the aesthetic, I think, of Snakes and Arrows. And when I think Snakes and Arrows, I think of this heavy intro. I think of the visuals from the live performances. And it's such the epitome of what this album means as a whole that I kind of have to agree. And I didn't even really think of it until you said it, where I was like, if I had to pick top three, I think this is a strong contender for sure. And this intro certainly helps solidify that.
It's in my top three as well. It's one of the reasons I wanted to be on this one because it stuck out. Even though we had said last week on our Far Cry episode that they even the band refers to Far Cry as like the summation of Snakes and Arrows and everything except in title. Title we'll have coming up shortly. But that being said, the whole philosophy of conflict and the themes of faith that this album addresses are Far Cry hints at them or discusses them, I guess we could say, but this starts breaking it down. So I would agree. This is definitely a hang on. And I can't remember which Instagram post. I thought it was one that Rob wrote on the harmonics that Alex uses in this song. Actually, make the song for me. So the first time I saw the live version on the concert, I missed this tour, unfortunately, thanks to work. But the harmonics that he uses, that metallic sound, that actually makes the song. So the first run through live, he doesn't play those harmonics. He's too busy playing a different line, and it's actually slightly jarring to me that they're missing. He plays them later, but that first part, I'm like, it's missing. So, okay, that's the intro. Let's get into the lyrics. So after we have this powerful intro that we just got done describing, when we get to the verse, it almost things sort of come to a rest, I'd call it. And there's this almost lilting guitar, acoustic guitar strumming from Alex. And again, going back to the conversation that Alex had in Toronto with David Gilmour, where Gilmour said something along the lines of, you can tell how strong your song is by whether or not it can be played on an acoustic. So we're going to be hearing a lot of acoustic through this. So there's acoustic strumming, and then the drums and bass will steadily come back in. The snakes and arrows a child is heir to are enough to leave 1,000 cuts. We build our defenses, a place of safety, and leave the darker places unexplored. Kind of a lot for only 4 lines, so I don't want to jump into the pre-chorus just yet. So who wants to start us off on that verse?
Right out of the gate, this song is extremely deep. Like, the music is, it doesn't really portray that, really. Like, it doesn't really have, like, a dark tone like Witch Hunt, and that song is, like, really dark and really deep. But, I mean, man, I'm left speechless. The snakes and arrows a child is heir to are enough to leave 1,000 cuts. That's a damning statement. If I ever heard one. I mean, just talk about how vulnerable people are as humans. I don't want to go on a tangent, but if this song is all about faith and the duality of faith, which is such a loaded, kind of vague word, because really it could mean 2 things. I think of religion, but if you look up what the definition of faith is, textbook is, it's your confidence in someone or something, anything, and I mean, Neil is right. As much as we, try to protect our families and our kids, there's so many evils out there, and we all experience loss and betrayal. We've all had someone we thought that was our friend or had our interest turn their back on us. And I feel like this first verse, I mean, the whole song is damning, but this is such a really damning strong statement out of the gate that it almost like leaves me speechless. It's just like exposes so much of our vulnerability as humans. I'm blown away. I'm done with my rant now. Somebody else go.
Neil actually, in the book Driven, he actually, compares this to dogs who, rescue dogs who, when they were little, may have been abused. And if they find homes later, that scar is still with them. And they could have, all the love in the world from their foster parents. They always have that thickening of the skin from the abuse that they had as from that abuse. So, in his mind, those 2 lines are very similar. So that always kind of sat with me, how the scars may only be skin deep, but they could, in reality, go a lot deeper.
Neil went on record, and here's where I'm going to start There's at least four references in here, and I don't think I'll hit them all, so I'll try and be as thorough as I can without being too long-winded. Death by a Thousand Cuts. I believe it's Ling Zhu, but don't quote me in case I got that wrong. So I know he's inspired by that line to put that there as far as the imprinting of belief. He went on record saying that. I'm not just pulling that out of the stratosphere. But Snakes and Arrows, we have the album title, and the reason for that, they had said, "Oh, well, that sounds familiar." Well, that's because it was. If anyone's familiar with in the U.S., the game Shoots and Ladders, or Out and About, it would have been is it Snakes and Ladders, I believe? Yeah, Snakes and Ladders. It's actually based on the 2,000 plus year old Hindi game Snakes and Arrows. When Neil went to go look up for a title, he thought Snakes and Arrows sounded familiar and it resonated with him. Then he found out, oh, it's Leela, the game, the yoga of Snakes and Arrows. So we talked a little bit about that last week on Far Cry, but hence our cover of the album is actually the game board for Snakes and Arrows. So I think we'll end up, rather than doing a whole talk about Snakes and Arrows, we'll just try and intersperse it through all the songs. But Snakes and Arrows, a child's heir to are enough to leave a thousand cuts. Neil had said that the imprinting of faith, or the imprinting of certain religious beliefs on children at a young age, that was what he was one. That was the inspiration for the lines. I don't want to say that's the only meaning. That was his inspiration for the lines. And then we build our defenses, a place of safety, and leave darker places unexplored. Two of the things that will come up in the conversation that helped inspire things were a poem called Dover Beach from Matthew Arnold, which we'll get to later in one of the lyrics, and The God Delusion, a book from Richard Dawkins in 2006 that basically it talks about atheism, agnosticism, a breaking down of religion, and then through logic, sort of debating the idea of certain religions and of faith in general, and goes after certain, I'll say arguments, but debates on either side, like who designed the designer, God of the gaps, which is to say if something's unexplained, you just say God, things like that. It talks about things like that. So the song being indemnification, I told you I'd go on too long of a rant on this one. Faith being the armor, and then when it's weaponized, used as a sword. So I will stop talking on this topic at that point, because that's where I was really going with this. Anyone have anything more on this first verse before we go into the pre-chorus? All right. So our pre-chorus said slow build on the music. Now we've got these abrupt, heavy tones, harder drums coming in, and it's ascending. That's going to come up later. But musically, Ryder, to use one of your favorite topics as far as the soundscape goes, this is ascending, like we're marching forward. It's that martial beat again, like Warpaint or like Manhattan Project that we've heard, or The Weapon musically that we've heard from them before. But sometimes the fortress is too strong or the love is too weak. What should have been our armor becomes a sharp and angry sword. So, thoughts on there, or should we jump to the verse?
Well, again, I have to point out the duality and the amount of opposition that are in these four statements: strong, weak, armor, sword. I mean, armor is defensive, right? You're protecting yourself from an enemy or an outside force. And a sword is for attacking. And I mean, with a sword, wars were fought with just swords and armor back centuries ago. And I don't want to be controversial, but I think, it says a lot how people, will behave when someone else doesn't agree with them.
I don't think that's a controversial take. I think we're seeing quite a bit of that these days from every direction. So, yeah, I'd agree.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest, what immediately jumped out to me, I mean, that is the, sometimes this whole like thing, it goes back to, at least like personally, where I think that a lot of people, at least where a belief system should be like rooted in, is like your own personal backbone and like how you kind of go about things. And this verse kind of goes on to, talk about like the distortions of faith, and not faith in just a religious context, faith in everything. And we'll see later on when it gets into meditation and medication. I like how very early on Kira brought up the fact that faith is much more than just religion in this context. Faith in, just concepts and, people, ideas, things. Um, when this belief and this backbone becomes like a point of like anger and contention and like judgment. I feel like it's very easy, there's one hand being defensive about your beliefs and, supporting yourself and things like that. But then there's the issue of imposing on others and I mean, literally using it as a sword. I say that all the time amongst people. Like, you can't use religion as a sword in a lot of contexts. Like, it's that's something that's your own personal thing. And personally, I would think that. And I think the nature of religion is that. And I think that this song does a very good way of painting out how any belief system uh, can both be something that on one hand is very helpful to find refuge in, find purpose. But on the other hand, how like distorted it can become. And honestly, you kind of hit a little bit of a point of like, oh, you're so far gone with how far like beliefs are that you honestly aren't even practicing belief any like the beliefs that you are actively saying anymore, and the hypocrisy of that. And I think this song does. I don't think it's implicitly stating that any specific group of people or any like form of, anyone is wrong for believing anything that they believe necessarily. I think it just points out hypocrisy amongst any group of people that becomes so far gone with, their necessity to, impose belief that you know, a lot of the tenets of their belief, kind of fall to the wayside.
Oh, it's absolutely an indemnification on the weaponization of that system. Look at the Crusade. History's bloody. Look at the Crusades. Look at the Inquisition. And then parallel that with whatever more recent examples you may have. So
Henry
no,
VIII.
they said that was that was the inspiration for this. That is absolutely the point of the song. Yeah, it's not that's not projection. That's not supposition. That's fact.
Hmm.
I said that inspired these. Well, in Roadshow, Neil even said that driving along through the United States and he saw the billboards, he was originally going to photograph them without comment or commentary, and then actually got the idea for this song based on that. He's like, after he saw a particular one, I can't remember what it said, but he saw a particular one. He's like, oh, okay, I got something to say on the topic, and the song lyrics wise was born. So. All right, we'll take us into the chorus. Again, we have that opening music, that sweet that began the song. And it says, "Our better natures seek elevation, a refuge for the coming night. No one gets to their heaven, small h, without a fight. No one." Now, I like how that we keep talking about it's sort of an indemnification of things. Uh, no one gets to their heaven without a fight. So it's like the calm before the storm, a refuge for the coming night. There's that protection, but then no one gets to their heaven without a fight. No one. So now here we go. It becomes offensive. We go on the offense. So thoughts on the chorus, musically or lyrically?
I definitely think that there's something super powerful about the idea that, you know, no one gets to their heaven without a fight. The solace that you seek isn't necessarily going to be defined by anybody else. Your heaven is your heaven. And sometimes you have to fight to feel like you're worth that greater existence, that you're worth the effort to be kind and to be caring, and how easy it is to slip into that and get defensive. And it's a very fine line between protecting yourself and having to protect yourself from others. And there's just something about like anybody who has it made easy and is on a gravy train, as we may see it and as we may project. I mean, we look at celebrities and rock stars, and then you read Geddy Lee's book. I mean, like nobody is within their life without struggle, and reshaping that perspective, I think, is something that everybody needs a reminder of. And just like your faith doesn't dictate you being a dick, essentially, to keep it concise.
Yeah,
So I
fight,
think it,
fight or struggle doesn't have to be violent. We could be doing
yeah,
covered last week on our snakes and arrows board as we go up each chakra and up each level. We're transcending as we ascend. You could eventually end up with cosmic consciousness, or you could kill those people because they don't believe what you believe. So
yeah, it's an active
different ways of
choice, and
viewing a
that's a war
fight.
within yourself. And yeah, it's a war within yourself and a war amongst your community. And you can either accept the struggles and help, or you can accept, you can deny the struggles and kind of harden yourself. And will you make it to your heaven if you don't feel good about what you chose in this life, to proceed and act out your life with? So it's a hell of a chorus.
Yeah,
One thing I also note, and something that uh, came up in a one of the roundtables that I did, that whenever Neil brings up something that repeats again and again, is that it's
Donna's
something
Law.
he wants you to pay attention to. And no one gets to heaven without a fight is a line that he keeps bringing up. And that's a line that he wants you to pay attention to, and wants something that if it's the one line in this song he wants you to leave with, it's that line. Because, Alana, to your point, no one knows what your heaven, small h, is. It's up to the person to find what their own heaven is, but you have to fight for it. It's just not going to come randomly. It's not going to come um, just because. It's not, you know, uh, you were born on third base and hit a triple, to paraphrase Pearl Jam. It's, you have to scratch and claw and earn your heaven, whatever that may or may not be.
Well said. Well said. All right, so it takes us back to the next verse, and we're back to that lilting guitar with individual, not strum notes this time. We hold beliefs as a constellation, a way to take us out of ourselves. Meditation or medication, a comfort or a promised reward. Ryder, you said you had something you want to throw down on this line?
Yeah, so this for meditation medication, like this kind of just once again shows, at least to me, when I first listened to this song, I didn't really like necessarily like get a grip on like the whole concept of the song until I read this lyric right here, specifically the last little blurb of it. Um, you know, a comfort or a promised reward. Um, that to me is very much like a clash between the nature of like belief and like not to say reality is definitely, I'm not like that's not at all what I'm saying, but like the clash between you know belief systems that are more or less based in like just like a core like faith system,
Faith and belief as
or
opposed to tangible, provable
exactly opposed
reality.
to a more tangible like concrete like system. That's where I'm getting at. Um, and I really like that meditation versus medication, like if we're thinking about like a mental illness, is what is being used here and what you choose to do to address it. Personally, I've never been on any medication for any like sort of thing I've gone through. I've always personally tried to just be a little bit more like take it on myself and do whatever. And personally, I've attempted like meditation and stuff before. And in some points of my life, it kind of works for me. Other points, it doesn't. And I like to see it as, sometimes on one hand, I can see like a very like concrete, clear path to like that. But in other senses, it kind of just feels like a comfort. And I feel like, oh, would it be better if I like would have tried to take like a different route, like through medication or something like that? You know, I really like this is such a great way of framing this whole issue. And honestly, I think this little other than, all the references to armor and sword, I love all the imagery that comes from that. This is my favorite lyric of the whole song right here. Medication or meditation, or meditation or medication, a comfort or a promise reward. That to me puts the nail on the head of the whole freaking song right there.
And note those are individual solutions, I might add, both meditation and medication to whatever, be it physical illness or, you know, spiritual malady, what have you. It's still something that's individual. That's not imposing that on somebody else in the armor and sword, dichotomy that we've been discussing. So interesting that we're zoning in on the individual on this part until we get to the pre-chorus. So we're on the individual at this point. Stand by. So
Also, just oh, I'm so sorry. You go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, the polite roundtable continues. So, um, the idea of medication and meditation as well, kind of toting that fine line earlier, that gray area and those perspectives, what one person may need versus, seek out in potential forms of need, addiction or anything like else, sorted with that, associated with that as well. You know, do you believe that this is genuinely something that is medicating you, that is comforting you, or is it a crutch? And is there space to have cognitive dissonance beyond that as well? Um, you know, don't sell yourself short.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're okay.
I had to throw that one out there.
Like, there's just something about that too, where it's, are you excusing yourself for the way you are because of limitations, or are you finding, is there comfort in true, like, absolution through that, and it's one of my favorite lyrics from the song as well, because it breaks it down into two different items as well as just reshaping that perspective. And I think Snakes and Arrows is such a perspective based album, that is summarized perfectly within this lyric.
Something the writer said, this is slightly off topic, but you were talking about the conflict of belief in reality. Okay. Well, someone that studied public health at a graduate level, something that I've kind of been keeping track of since I started school 4 years ago, is how especially since like 2019, there's been so much explosion in like misinformation about science. I'm coming at this from a very specific angle. Please bear with me. And disinformation about science and health science and science topics. And there are some people out there, certain people that are prominent, that are spreading this misinformation, and they're taking vulnerable people who don't understand or have a good understanding of science and health, and they're exploiting them. But in studying this and belief in reality clashing, at this point, there's so much misinformation that sometimes I'm like, you don't know what to believe anymore. Like sometimes you don't really know reality from fact.
So what you're saying is they took the armor and they turned it into a sword, is what you're saying.
Yes and no. Like, yes, turning it into a sword to the point where I've seen certain scientists get like death threats because of these people.
Weaponization of a belief system.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking about that and what Ryder said, and I was like, it's really hard to have faith these days because you just don't know what's real sometimes. Like, it's hard navigating our world. Like, with all the social media we have and everything, you think that we would be more connected than ever. This is the information age. But really, it's just such a web of, confusion. So, how do you have faith in our climate today? Is what I was thinking.
Exactly.
Very, very apt to the conversation.
And oddly enough, I mean, I'm sure you guys will discuss it later, but Neil kind of brings that up in Faithless. His own ideas of, fools and thieves are well disguised in the temple and marketplace, because the idea of fake news and you know the comfort or promise reward. I instantly thought of 72 virgins in the old Muslim tales, but it could be the promise of COVID, albeit 15 years after the fact of this record, or the promise of a better tomorrow, or a better economy, or a better neighborhood. Enter your personal heaven, whatever that may or may not be.
Nicely done. Yeah. Yeah. Timely, ain't it? All right. Pre-chorus, heavy and ascending again, reaching that reaching rhythm in the music again. Sometimes that spirit is too strong or the flesh is too weak. Extremes again. Sometimes the need is just too great for the solace we seek. The suit of shining armor becomes a keen and bloody sword. And actually, I'm going to include the chorus here again because they tie in. No one gets to their heaven without a fight, a refuge for the coming night, a future of eternal light. No one gets to their heaven without a fight. No one. So again, that conflict, that extremism, that we take the armor and it becomes weaponized and it becomes a sword. So spirit too strong, flesh is too weak. I think it was Kira, your point earlier, as far as the where we see the two different sides addressed again, where it starts off as, this is workable, and then we're going to amp it up a couple notches. So, all right. Takes us into the bridge. So we've got that chorus music again, but then there's an interlude during the bridge where we have very martial beats, and now the tone is descending. So if you notice, it's been amping up, and Ryder, back to how you were describing the arrangement of the song, and shout out to Armac, Randy, who's going to be on a future roundtable. He's an arranger, so wish you were on this one, pal. Now the tone is descending, and it's notable here because then the lyrics go, to confused alarms of struggle and flight, blood is drained of color by the flashes of artillery light. No one gets to their heaven without a fight. The battle flags are flown at the feet of a god unknown. No one gets to their heaven. Oh, that got dark.
Yeah, very dark. Now we got blood. Lots of blood.
Yeah,
I find it.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
No, I just have one thing to say. I find it really interesting. The first line, confuse alarms of struggle and flight. Of course, I think of the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and the touch on human instinct. I like that he kind of put that in there. Reminds me of Hold Your Fire. Anybody? One of the best lyrically written albums ever. I just really like that he sort of put that in there. It's just a nice little, icing on the cake kind of thing. And that's all I had to say.
I think when it
Plays into
comes
how
to artillery, no one really sees the color of red. All you see is the flashing lights of the artillery. Doesn't matter what side it is.
Yeah. The fight or flight is a very interesting way to bring it up, how when you're prompted with something that's so stark right in front of you, you kind of have a lot of people have no other reaction other than to just immediately you know, you have to kind of just not necessarily, I don't think it's kind of you're throwing something your way. Honestly, even just kind of you're presented something in an argument. And I feel like people sometimes, if they aren't willing to be open to a perspective, especially recently, the thing that I've kind of noticed is, especially in conversations with people, if you're kind of discussing a debate topic, there needs to be a baseline willingness in the conversation for people to understand that hey, conflicting viewpoints are going to be presented. This is here just to we're here just to talk about this, talk this through. And I feel like when people in their heads aren't necessarily as clear on that, if they don't know if it's so easy to feel like someone is just preaching something at you, like hitting you with like their belief so fast, which, that does happen. But in a situation where it's like, hey, I'm just trying to show you this thing, they see it as that. And they're immediately like, my response is to just be like, no, this is like, that's so wrong. Like this, here we go. I like that he brings up instinct as a point of contention for how these beliefs come up. To speak to the music of this section, this is a very big musical shift from what we've heard so far, and I can't understand why this is like a very like staunch transition. Like it doesn't sound like either of the two like main like musical ideas we've hit before. Um, but kind of how this song has had moments where it goes from like a hard rock thing and then it kind of opens up a little bit more in the choruses. I see this as kind of how the start of the song was just the just the drums, and then it slowly builds up over time. And you see that with the guitar solo that comes in, like that just screaming, wailing. That it opens up, Um, I don't think that this is a like an inappropriate transition. This when I hear like ill-fitting sections like right at the start of this, that was where I was like, "Oh, the bridge." Like that's where I would think is like the most like out of place moment of the song. But especially after the solo and how they come at brr, brr, bah, bah, and then they're just right back into that like pre-chorus groove. I think it's a great part of the song. I love the solo. Lyrics are really, really great. Yeah, I think it's a dope transition.
I do got to jump on one thing that has been quoted, which is confused alarms of struggle and flight has been pointed out. The poem Dover Beach I mentioned at the start of the episode, 1867, Matthew Arnold. Neil has said in interviews that the line that popped into his head as he was writing this was ignorant armies clash by night. And it was familiar, so he had to look it up. He looked it up and he found it was from Dover Beach. So he wanted to pay homage to that by using a line from it. So the last four lines of Dover Beach are nor certitude nor peace, nor help for pain, and we are here as on a darkening plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Everything we've talked about, but that's where he got the line from. So the solo, as Ryder alluded to, is here, and it's that same descending music from the bridge out, but with individual paired notes and bends. I love it because I'm no Alex Kelly, I'm no Rob Bookta, so I can't speak to the exact notes, arpeggios, and everything that's being hit. But the fact that it is very soaring, I get that battlefield feel of it. It's just things flying through the air at each other, be they arrows, missiles, what have you. But again, they're ascending. The bends, by the way, on the guitar notes from a very amateur guitar player, as they ascend, but the music descends. It's kind of it's very jarring. It's word dissonant. So I think it fits really well. Going back to what you're saying as far as the structure of the songwriter. So it takes us back into the pre-chorus again. No one gets to their heaven without a fight. Sometimes the damage is too great. So it's almost like he's closing with, what do we have now from all this conflict? Sometimes the damage is too great or the will is too weak. What should have been, hindsight, our armor becomes a sharp and burning sword. Religious iconography there. And another chorus. No one gets to their heaven without a fight. A refuge, and the vocalization of no, thank you, Getty. A refuge for the coming night, a future of eternal light. Why were we doing this? No one gets to their heaven without a fight. No one gets to their heaven without a fight. Then we have the outro, which I'll get into in a second. But as far as lyrically, anything that we've left unsaid up to this point?
These Getty vocals are butter smooth. Oh my God.
Yeah.
The choruses in the song are so good. His voice is just amazing here. He's the whole song, he's incredible, but just these choruses, I'm just like, oh my God, this is what I come to Rush music for. So good.
The dual
Um,
vocal lines here, especially, just
yeah.
it's the way it's very like not jarring, dissonant, I guess, but they're perfectly in tune. So it's just
Well, it's almost like it's kind of like he's doing what the bass chords are doing. I mean, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it through my mic. I don't know if my noise canceling crap is on, but pardon my ukulele bass. It's just these really like tight.
Nope. But
These
yeah, I
just
get it.
really, really tight chords, and it's on the bass, it sounds so like dissonant and like up close
Yes.
together. But I mean, like it just all works. It all comes together, and it's
It's very
fantastic.
foreboding. Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
foreboding.
it's just so cool, and I love how at the end, the drum beat kind of just like it kind of gets a little bit more sparse, but still like very commanding. You got Alex in the back with his like harmonics or whatever he's doing here. And then just that outro is so cool. Just the main riff.
It's a fade,
I
not a
forgot
fade
what.
out. A fade. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm glad that it got like a proper ending. The main riff, I should have brought it up when we were talking about the verses. Love that riff. I think it's in a little bit of a wonky time signature. But how they bring it back here at the end with the acoustic guitar at the end strumming that big chord, I'm just like, oh, snake, that's such a like snakes and arrows vibe right there. So
Like the
good.
dust settling at the end of a battle,
Yeah.
musically.
I think this song is incredibly profound, beautifully, beautifully written, so poignant, deep, and heavy, but also somewhat light with the music. I love how Neil is very critical, but yet he doesn't really alienate anybody, which is an art that I will never master. Props to him. But I definitely think, like, I don't want to say this song is underrated, but it sort of feels like it is. Because you have Far Cry in front of him. Far Cry has such punchy music. And this is much more mellow in comparison. So I
I
just
would have
had
liked to have seen it after Snakes and Arrows on Time Machine or Clockwork Angels or R40. It didn't. It was played just for, I believe it was the second half of Snakes and Arrows. Someone can correct me. Maybe it was the whole tour. No, it was the whole tour, sorry. But only the Snakes and Arrows tour. It didn't go beyond that. I do want to bring up really quick, lest I forget, the Hughesheim artwork. As we mentioned last week, every song has its own artwork, and this is the artwork that they came up with for the song. Pretty straightforward. I do like the shadows of the skulls back here by the lyrics, but obviously we have our armor and we have our swords. So quite the quite the piece.
I actually like the skull behind the mask as well.
Yeah, I did see that. So okay, before we wrap this bad boy up, anyone have any parting words?
Yeah. My last little thing right here. I think this song proves like Kira, I like how you mentioned that. Neil doesn't necessarily like come at anybody here. I think when it he has such strength as a songwriter to not like necessarily jab at anybody anything, like especially today. Like it would be so easy to just like make a song like this and specifically target whatever group you don't like and be like, "Oh, you're entirely 100% wrong." Neil is entirely bringing up the nuances of faith and things like that. And like the the boldness to just be like, this is just to call out like I feel like with Neil and his songwriting, he's a songwriter, like his when he brings up topics, he has the things that he believes about them, but I never necessarily feel like he's like outright super declaring like a intense position on something.
He writes
And
universally.
exactly, he writes universally. And I think Neil is an incredibly intelligent man. And I think that in moments where Neil does come out and like put his foot down, honestly, a lot of the time he's spitting. He knows what he's talking about. And this right here, the one line out of all of this that has any sort of like, I think like this is the most concrete like point of this. What should have been our armor becomes a sharp and burning sword. And I think especially right now, I think the most important thing is to not like you can't like let this kind of stuff like super pull you apart. Like you have to, especially I think the best way to kind of come at like topics and discussions of faith with people um is to, like I said earlier, establish a baseline that what you're talking about is we're just here like presenting ideas, like we're all here, we're all human, like let's figure this out. And I think having the humility to know that ultimately everyone is entitled to believe what they believe, but you know, you need to be able to like say your stuff, but be respectful and understanding of like, you know, we got to be here to have these conversations, these difficult and really important conversations. And I think that through exposure and through like humility and being like, just there and understanding, I think that is ultimately a great way to approach like moments where you feel like, not you feel, where your belief and these things kind of come out and start being hostile towards people. I think if people were a little bit more prone to be like, kind of approach it from like a more debative and analytical standpoint, as opposed to just, what should have been your armor becomes your sword.
More armor,
I
less sword. Yeah.
Exactly, more armor, less sword. I think just especially, this song really, really highlights that for me. That like, you know, everyone is gonna say what they think, but that's because no one gets to their heaven without a fight. Like you are going to believe what you believe, and you are going to say the things that you want to, and other people are going to say the things that they want to say, regardless of what, you want to. But you got to be able to say your stuff and be able to present your stuff, but still be open to, you gotta know when the things that you're saying, like you got to be able to self-recognize and be like, okay, I might be being a little ridiculous here. Be able to be presented with information, be able to be like, have your mind change. Don't use these things as a sword. You know, everything changes, dog. That's really all I got on that. And I think Neil just encapsulates that incredibly here.
Trust to your instincts if it's safely restrained. Lightning reactions must be carefully trained.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Oh, oh my gosh. There you go. Yeah, right there.
All right. And I'm going to do one piece of self correction. The first line, I forgot to mention the fact that Slings and Arrows of Outrageous Fortune also inspired that first line of Snakes and Arrows, which I was there too. Sorry, I'm a completionist. I had to make sure I got that in the episode, lest I get commented on later. All right, gang. Thank you so, so much to our panel for being here for this. As we all decided we made it through it. That being said, do please like and subscribe. Put a comment in there. What do you think? Do you like the song? Do you agree with any of our points? Do you disagree with them? Respectfully display your armor in the comments if so. That being said, do check out our sponsors. Links are below. Check out our merch shop. We got plenty. And we will see you next time.